So I'm going to show you how to paint a simple watercolor tulip using the wet into wet technique. And I'm going to start with just some clear water, making just a loose shape. This tulip will start over here and I'll have the stem curve around this way just to give it some dimension. And I'm just making a simple vase shape using clear water. I'll hold my paper up to the light so you can see the shape I'm creating here. The reason why I'm using clear water is because I'm going to drop in a bit of color and let it softly blend into that wet area. So I will show you what this looks like. When I lift up my paper, you can see there's a bit of a shimmer of water, and that is where I'm going to drop in my color. The key here is that you don't want too much water on your paper. If it's pooling, just take a thirsty brush. It's just like a brush that's damp, and you're going to soak up anything excess. Now is the time to start dropping in color. And I'm going to use a smaller brush because then I can get a little bit more detail. This is a number 4, and I'm using a mix of Winsor Violet and Opera Pink, but you can also mix up a purple using a nice blue, a deep blue. Cobalt blue would work too with rose madder or permanent rose. I just have these available right now, so I'm mixing up sort of a purplish hue with my Winsor Violet, and I'm just going to start following the curve of this flower, concentrating more along the base, and we'll touch in a little bit up here. I also like to have a bit of color variation, so I might put a little bit more pink in one area and have another area lean more purple. Now notice how wherever you have water, the paint creates this velvety spread across. And wherever you have your water line meeting your dry paper, you'll get a hard edge. That creates definition. But this is one of the joys of watercolor, where you can direct the paint. You can create these soft, sort of atmospheric textures. You'll also see where I left the paper white. Because we don't use the color white in watercolor, you know, you certainly can, but we use the white of the paper for the highlight. So in that way we leave. I'm going to dry off my brush and clean up this edge here. And I'm going to create another little edge there, but I might wait. It's starting to dry. I left a bit of white to create a bit of a highlight, and I will add in my green stem after this dries. And then we can create another layer with even more detail. So for this next step, now that our first layer has completely dried, we can add a second layer to give a few more petals and definition with some fine lines. So I'm going to start kind of the same way I began, with just a clear glaze of water on one of the petals, and then I will drop in my color into that area. And this allows me to get some definition along some hard edges. So I'm taking a number 4 and I'm just going to paint in a clear glaze of water. If you have too much water, just dab it off onto your paper towel. And now I'm going to go and grab some of that mixture of my purple and pink. I'm going to give a bit more detail following the curvature of the petals. You can pop in a bit of deeper color along the bottom if you want, and also maybe a bit on the lip of this petal. If you have too much paint, dab it off there. You can tell you have too much paint if it spreads too quickly. This is something that comes with time once you've been working with watercolors for a while. But I like what I have going on here. I've got some fine lines that become very soft, very velvety, because I'm using that wet into wet technique. And I'm still leaving some room for that white to show through. Let's put in a petal on this side. Again, I rinsed off my brush, and I'm going to put a layer of clear water over here. And just keep in mind, if you touch this other layer with this layer, they will merge together. It's up to you if you want to do that. Otherwise, you can leave it separated like I am here, because I want these to be two distinct petals, and I want to have a bit more control. Now see, what I'm doing here is I've got a little bit too much water, so I'm soaking it up, dabbing it. Now I'm going to come in with my purple and pink, and let's touch in a bit of color along the bottom here. And you can follow the curve of the petals. See, when you create these little fine lines, they're softer. They're softer than they would be if you were to just paint directly onto dry paper. So I'm trying to capture the softness of the coloration in the tulips with these little soft lines. Now I'm going to let this dry before I do the center, and while that dries I'm going to add in my green stem and some leaves. So I'm going to take a bit of a bigger brush here, a number 10, and I'm going to get a nice little green color. I'm using a cobalt blue mixed with a bit of like a mid-tone yellow. I believe this is Hansa yellow. But I like to mix my greens because then I can control if I want them to lean more blue or more yellow. I like that variation. So I'm trying to think of how I want this to go. So I'm going to create a stem that curves around this way and some leaves behind it. So I'm going to paint my stem first. Let's use a smaller brush, using a number 8. I'm not going to touch that green, the green to the purple yet. And just pull down with your arm in one little sweep. I'm going to wait for this to dry before I touch the two. And now I'm going to add in just a simple petal shape using a bigger brush, or sorry, not a petal, a leaf, using a number 10, starting at the outer edge, push down, come in, and sort of sweep. Now you can touch in a bit of your color onto the outer part. And I decided to leave a bit of white in the middle just to give it that look of a highlight. Now I want to remove some of this, so I'm going to take a thirsty brush, soak it up, and dab it onto my paper towel. A thirsty brush is just a brush that's been removed of color. It's damp like a sponge, and that allows you to soak up anything excess and remove it. So for the other side, going to add another leaf here, maybe just a simple one, comes down, and we can always add another layer later if we want to. I'm going to leave it at that, and then we'll start on the middle part of this tulip. Bring in some more of your violet and some of your pink. I'm using Opera Pink and Windsor Violet. Just have those colors on hand. So I'm going to start with the center petal, and again using just some clear water, I'm going to paint in the center, pull it down, dab off any excess water, and now I'm going to grab some color. I want it to be see how I've got a more saturated mixture going on this palette? That's what I'm looking for. And let's start at the top and pull down. See where you drop in color and release, you get more of a deeper look. And let's define a little bit of a petal over here. Like that one's tucked behind. And because I've got such a strong color back there, I want to match it a little bit in this front petal. So I'm going to match it down here. And I might define this other petal by painting a bit of a darker purple behind it. Rinse my brush, and I'm going to pull up this color and just soften it out. I think I'll give a bit of definition over here too. Let's come around this side. And rinse my brush, and I want to soften that hard edge, so I'm going to pull up some of this color, rinse and meet it back down, softening it. And I want to pop in another little petal over here, like it's sort of tucked behind these ones. And then just on this leading edge here, it's a little bit too dark. I'm going to rinse, take my brush again, and this part is fairly dry, but I'm just going to pull out a few lines. And it's a bit too harsh for me, so I'm going to rinse my brush and I'm going to fade it. There, it's a little bit better. Again, if you have any harsh edges or too dark of colors, take a thirsty brush and soften them up. All right, I like what's going on there. I'm going to leave it alone now. I'm going to come back in and define the stem a little bit more. So I got my cobalt blue mixed with my yellow. And I'm going to just add a bit more to the edge of this stem. Rinse my brush. Soften, and I'll add a bit more of that darker color. Actually, I'm going to use a bigger brush because I want to create a bit more shadowing in that leaf. So I'm going to mix a bluer tone. I'm going to come back in here and just give it a bit of a shadow. And I'm having the leaf sort of tucked behind the stem, so while the stem is dry, I'm just painting alongside it, and that gives the leaf, that makes the leaf move into the background, and it makes the stem seem like it's in front of that leaf. So I'm just making sure I leave an edge there between the stem and the leaf. We can even move the leaf back here too to even give a bit more of the illusion that it's behind. So you're going to follow this line, skip over the stem, and then tuck in that leaf right here with your bit of blue. Now this is cobalt blue mixed with my Hansa yellow. You can use a different yellow or a different blue. I'm just deepening that. So now we've got a leaf that follows that same line. You can poke in that color over here to even it out. So now it looks like the stem is in front of that leaf. We can give a bit of definition to this leaf too. I think what I'm going to do is just take a bit of that blue and come up to the top and pull down and release. Like maybe this is the underside of the leaf pointing away, and I'm just going to leave it at that. I might add a bit of blue on this side of the stem though, just to give it some shadowing. And then as it merges with the flower, it widens just a little bit. If your flower is dry, you can do this. If it's not, just keep in mind that your paint might bleed a little bit into that purple. And there's a simple watercolor tulip.